Hi, welcome to another episode of Rave Sensation. I'm your host, Dan. And on this episode, we'll be taking a look at a bunch of horror and exploitation movie fanzines. And it just so happens that about half of them are from England. So let's take a look, shall we? Okay, so even though, as I say, a bunch of these fanzines are actually from England, I'm going to start off with some good old American fanzines that are about European movies. At least the first one is. In this box, one of the first things I saw was this fanzine, European Trash Cinema, by Craig Ledbetter. And you can see this is the very early type of fanzine that we were kind of used to at one point in the US. This was not an uncommon thing to see for fanzines. It's just a couple of pages, Xeroxed and folded. Humble beginnings. Craig is justifiably kind of famous now among European trash cinema fans. He was an early pioneer of doing research on these films and letting people know they were available. And his magazine was very influential to a lot of people. And from this humble beginnings, this is one of the later issues. This one just happened to be in that box too. It does have things about Dario Argento and Klaus Kinski, which, you would probably see in other magazines covering horror and exploitation films, not necessarily European. But these are deep dives, people. They really cover a lot of ground, cover a lot of films that other people weren't. Here it is, in a fanzine. One of the best things about fanzines is they would write about each other. And so it had that effect of, you get one good fanzine, you see a review, you go get the next one. I have so many fanzines, or at least I did. I don't know what I'm going to find in storage, what I still have and what I don't. But I recognize a lot of titles for fanzines in these reviews that I checked out. I might not necessarily have heard from them in here, but it doesn't hurt to see the same title listed in more than one fanzine to make you go, oh, I really need to get that one. So there's all these interviews with actors and actresses and directors and writers that he covered that you just didn't see in other fanzines. And just writing about it. Look how dense this is. Look how much these film reviews are just incredible, and covering all kinds of what we would call exploitation genre stuff, including, of course, all these magazines pretty much covered the spaghetti westerns and stuff. So so I definitely think when you're snooping around, if you come across the European Trash Cinema, definitely pick that up. Definitely worth getting. This is Shock Cinema. And the great thing about Shock Cinema, Steve, who puts this out, he also put out, before this, he did a great fanzine called Slime Time, which had at least one book in several different editions come out compiling reviews from. After Slime Time, he went off to Shock Cinema, and this one is very much like the Psychotronic. Psychotronic was kind of a bigger name, but Shock Cinema is still around and kicking, people. It was a contemporary of Psychotronic magazine, but it's still here. And just by coincidence, one of the things when I was flipping through those Psychotronics in another video, I mentioned what a great interview there was with Fred the Hammer Williamson in it. And here he is again. The two are very similar. Now that I'm reading them, I'm seeing like, oh, whoa. But this is a great one to get. This is number 15. I don't know if it's still available or not, Um, the great thing about this book is, this magazine, is how many character actors they interview and talk to and tell little, there's a lot of great anecdotes about all these movies you've seen them in. And, some of these people are people who worked on big budget movies too, and they talk about those a little bit. But terrific. The other thing that highlights this is the range of films they talk about, because it doesn't have to be exploitation. It doesn't have to be gory or violent or have a lot of sex. They really just look for peculiar films. There's films in here. I read a lot about films and go like, what in the world? Who was this made for? Terrific stuff. It doesn't mean, in this day and age, I don't have the time to track down this stuff the way I used to. But it's incredible, the stuff they find and write about. And it's just a terrific magazine. Like I said, look it up online, get a subscription. It's still being produced, and it's still great. So check it out. Check out his website, Shock Cinema. Okay? This one, Wrapped in Plastic, this is kind of a later issue. I had some of the earlier ones, which were, I thought were kind of fun. This one's kind of, by the time it gets to this, Wrapped in Plastic has become kind of weird. It's a Twins Peak fanzine. It's basically about that first 2 seasons of the show. And they have Mark Frost, who co-created Twin Peaks with David Lynch. Between the two of them, people find symbolism in just every tiny little detail that these two guys put into this show. I mean, the weird obsessiveness about things, the conspiracy ideas behind this stuff, is just so amazing. It's a weird fanzine to read. Now, the other thing they do that was really interesting is at the end of each magazine, they have all this stuff where anybody who had any relationship, mostly the actors and actresses, but some of the writers and people who worked on this show, they follow them throughout their career. Every time they appear on another show or in a movie, or even in the case of David Duchovny, they have all these times he appeared on talk shows promoting stuff. They list it all. It is, again, pretty obsessive, but pretty fun. If you're at all interested in Twin Peaks, of course, this was many, many years before they realized they were going to get a third season to kind of bring a little closure. So really interesting to check out, but only if you're crazy into Twin Peaks. This magazine is Tease. It is about a history of pinups, striptease artists, things like that. It occasionally covers someone who's currently trying to, keep these old styles alive. It's an interesting magazine. The reason I got it, though, was the Cramps. And but there's a second part in here. This article is about JD publications, juvenile delinquent paperbacks, the reform school girls kind of thing, as they say here. And it's by Miriam, who oh, not that one. Where's my oh, I put it under here. Who co-created Kicks with her husband Billy. So she had a short-lived fanzine, a small fanzine called Bad Seed, which covered these JD books. So there's some covers and stuff. But this is the reason I bought it. So this is Poison Ivy, the lead guitarist for one of the greatest bands of all time, the Cramps. She did a lot of pinup style pictures to help promote the Cramps over the years. And all these photographs, and there's some really great layouts that she's done. They should do a whole book of these things. Although at this point, she's no longer interested in revisiting the Cramps. Lux has long ago passed away. Who knows what happened to these pictures? I'd love to see more of this stuff. So, you know, they're pretty racy. They're pinups. It's great stuff. Great stuff. She's even the pinup in the middle. So there's Poison Ivy. It's photographed by her husband, Lux Interior. The Cramps. Great. And, you know, for those of you who are interested in pinup art, you know, and there's actresses. And, here's an article on Tora Santana. You know, from Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, the Russ Meyer movie. So that's a bonus. Now I've got a lot of interviews with her in different magazines, but because of that Russ Meyer connection. But, you know, doesn't make this one. That just adds to the appeal of this one. Okay, so now we're to the run of British fanzines. And so this is Diabolique, and this is from Fab Press. The Fab Press connection is pretty deep in these magazines. You know, and those of you who aren't familiar with Fab Press, shame. They've got a lot. They've done a lot of fantastic book publishing. There's this series, a guide to exploitation movies, guide to monster movies by Michael Gingold from Fangoria and stuff like that. Those are some great titles. You know, I'll probably have to do something about them at some point. But you know, this has got all kinds of great stuff. When you're flipping through the bins at the conventions and you see these, it's definitely worth looking at. This is Ian McCulloch, a Scottish actor who appeared in a lot of Italian schlock. 3 in particular: Zombie Flesh Eaters, Contamination, and Zombie Holocaust. And there's a nice interview with him about doing these movies. You know, and there's more great spaghetti westerns articles. This one's by Kevin Grant. So, and interviews the future. 2000. I don't remember that happening. So yeah, this magazine basically is covering a lot of great schlocky stuff. Really, really fun. There's that. Here's Delirium, made by some of the same people who were involved in this as in that one. And this one is this one's all about Italian cinema, which a lot of these movies cover Italian films because they're pretty great at churning out the kind of stuff that people were interested in. And great reviews, filmographies. So Delirium, you know, again, if you spot one of these in the wild, you know, I don't know what these go for online. You might, for all I know, they're on eBay really cheap. But another one that's definitely worth getting. Uncut was originally a fanzine that, when Video Watchdog first started, Tim Lucas's Video Watchdog, early issues had a lot of coverage given to cuts made in films and the impact that censorship had on these movies and the fact that we can't see them in these uncut forms. And it got to be it got to kind of overwhelm the other things that Tim Lucas was writing about. So they kind of downplayed it in later issues of Video Watchdog. And it's kind of the same with this magazine. This was originally covering where in the world you could get a video that was uncut of these movies. Of course, you know, this is from England, and you know, they had a lot of censorship that went on for sometimes really ridiculous stuff. So they were really interested in knowing where they could get those uncut versions. This is one of the ones where it's less of that in it than their earlier issues. There's some great writing in it. There's some great filmographies in it. Just terrific stuff. One thing I did notice, although I didn't point it out in the other issues, is Flesh for Frankenstein, Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, gets a lot of coverage in most of these issues. I'm not sure what was in the air. Well, I don't know. I guess a version of it had just come out over there or somewhere and was making the rounds because they just cover it so much. And it's one of those ridiculous movies that, yeah, it's worth seeing because it's so ridiculous. And actually, it played in 3D. I got to see it in 3D. They had this was back in the 90s, I guess, or maybe it was the early 2000s. I don't remember. But the 3D, I don't really see the 3D that well. So even today, even to this day, with the 3D movies. So I don't know, but it's a ridiculous movie. It's funny because it's so ridiculous. Although I prefer the Andy Warhol's Dracula. Anyway, so again, lots of great fun movies covered. Here's an interview with John Carpenter. You know, you've probably read a million of those by now, so very good. Eyeball. Paul Morrissey interviewed, and that's, there's from Frankenstein again. Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. So, yeah, there it is. And this one is by Stephen Thrower. Is that how you say his name? I think that Thrower is how you say his name. And he's written a lot for, or a fair amount for Fab Press. Like I say, a lot of these fanzines have ties to the great Fab Press. And he wrote one of my favorite book on American exploitation independence. And Nightmare USA. And this huge, and I do mean huge, and the amount of research he did on these American independents, these little films that so few people care about, is just amazing. The filmographies, this is just amazing stuff. The people he tracked down to interview, he treats all these people who made these low budget, kind of messy, kind of kooky films as real artists, which may sometimes annoy you because he lets these people say things and that where somebody else might say like, oh, well, don't look to him to be making light of these movies, no matter how ridiculous some of them might look. He lets the filmmakers be serious about this. Like, don't go in the house. That has gotten re-released several times now. So, I think most people know that, are familiar with that. But there's all kinds of just tremendous stuff in here. This video is not really about this. I just thought I'd point it out because it needs its own video. But boy, I couldn't help, just in case. It's a while till I get to that. So back to this. Ridiculous pictures from more of these movies. And then Flesh and Blood. This is fun. I originally saw Flesh and Blood. I saw the later issues. Now, Flesh and Blood is it's an exploitation one, but more than most of the British fanzines, it covers the skin things, not straight up porn, but movies preoccupied with sex. Now, these like I said, I didn't see the first couple issues. luckily they put this together, and it covers those first 2 issues. If I had seen the, I do like photographs taken off a video screen for to show, to illustrate your articles about a video. There's an ad for some other Fab Press publications. This is a pretty rough looking first issue, but not, like I said, a lot of the very first fanzines are really very amateur. And what's really amazing when you look at the history of fanzines is how quickly all these guys got in competition with each other and upped their game. I mean, it's just amazing to me, because it ends up with a lot of fanzines that are, to my mind, more important and just as good looking as any of the newsstand stuff. So anyway, and then just between that's the first issue. The leap between that and the second issue, which is this part of the publication, is amazing. I mean, the difference is just great. Now, a lot of these are pretty common British horror films. They were pretty common even here in the U.S. So I don't know if the information in here, if this, how badly you would need this particular one. It's pretty regular fancy stuff. But it is interesting that they did that. And then, there's an interview with Russ Meyer. We don't want to linger on that too much. Well, like I said, they do concentrate on the fleshier side. And Russ Meyer's movies, of course, have action. They have violence and stuff in them, but most people don't remember them for that. I really think that Faster Pussycat Kill Kill needs to be seen by everybody. And then they cover a lot of other stuff. And then I remember this article. This is interesting. It's one of the first things I remember reading about the whole final girl. The trope that there's one at the end of the horror movie, the killer has killed off everyone except this one final girl. And this article talks about that in folk tales and fairy tales and stuff. And that's a pretty interesting kind of thing. I think that'll be it for today. And I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope that encourages you to check out some of those fanzines of the past.